So, Catherine, we're going to come now to look at the subject of our life journey.
Wherever you're at in your life journey now, you will have a history that you can look back on. And in that, you will see that God has been working in different times and in different seasons. As we're looking at what it is that God's calling us to do now in the next season, there are also quite often some really good clues about what God might be calling us to do now that are kind of held in the things which have happened in the past. So it might be that as you look back, you remember times when you were doing things that really gave you life and joy that maybe you sort of let go of. And it might be that this is a moment to pick those things back up again.
Yes.
Equally, there might be things that you look back at and you think, actually, that was really hard work. It didn't really suit me. That wasn't something that I was doing that really fitted who I was. And so actually there's something to learn in that in terms of how you go forwards.
Yes, so it's a series of seasons, isn't it? And we can look back and have lessons from both the ups and the downs. And I guess we're formed along the way, however many ups and downs there are.
And part of the reason for looking at it that way is that sometimes we can feel a bit discouraged, that we haven't sort of started life particularly if you have a moment where you say, well, I became a Christian then, and then God began to work in my life, and I thought I might do great things for God, and I thought that things would go from glory unto glory, and things would get better and better and better. And then you can kind of look and think, well, actually, it hasn't felt like that at all. There have been times that have been really difficult. There have been times where I've just felt like I have stagnated and not much has been happening. So yeah, part of our reasoning is to say, well, you can have a look back and see what are the seasons that I've been through. And what was God doing in them? Because usually what we find is that as we look back, we discover that God has been at work, that we have grown and have been shaped by the things that we've walked through.
It's interesting. And I can look back at times where I've been terrified about certain things happening. For example, my mother's deaths, becoming unwell, etc., and they've happened, and yet God's still been with me, and I would have chosen them in a million years. But actually, I did learn things. So I'm sure we can all point to things like that.
If I look back over the last sort of 15 years or so, 17 years possibly, when things have been quite difficult in my life, I've actually, on 3 occasions, I've had a nervous breakdown and kind of got to the point of not functioning. But I can look at those times now and see what God was doing in me through those times, which at the time feel fairly useless and very difficult. But what I can see is that there are things that God has shaped in me, and actually I've come out of those times a much freer person than I went into them.
That's interesting. Very honest.
So, yeah. The other thing that is quite important to see, I think, is that there are different kinds of seasons. So there are seasons when our focus really is on the things that we are doing for God and the things that we might feel that we're called to do. But then there are other seasons when actually what God is doing in us is forming us. And there isn't a requirement to be doing lots of things. Actually, it's a time when our focus is on being rather than on doing. It's about relationship, and God might be doing something quite deep within us, but that doesn't come out in lots of kind of excitement and stuff going on.
We become our life message. So it's more our life message coming through us and what we've walked through and what we've learned, rather than necessarily what we do.
Yeah.
Which has the most lasting effect. And that's quite an interesting one. We're quite used in our societies to be looking for more visible evidence of what we quote do, rather than impacts of who we are or what we've learned, and therefore what we can carry.
I also, when I look back through my life, I think that there are particular themes which have felt really resonant recently, and then I look back and I think, I was already thinking about that. So, for example, I worked as a speech and language therapist for quite a while, and I was a team leader. And one of the things that I was always really keen on when I was leading a team, managing a department, was sitting down with people and finding out, what is it that you're passionate about? What is it that you really like to do? What element of speech and language therapy fulfills you?
Yes.
What would you like? How would you like to see our department move forwards? And I loved having those conversations with individual people. And so when I began writing the loved called Gifted course and
Yes.
doing some of that stuff with Sean Kennedy,
Yeah.
I kind of thought, oh, this is really interesting, because this is something that I've been passionate about for longer than I thought.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were really engaging with those people,
Yeah.
listening to them,
Yeah.
and helping them to shape how you did things in the department, which was very honouring.
I thought, oh, that is something which is sticking with me, was that thing about just really caring about what people wanted to do and wanting people to be autonomous. So quite a lot of the stuff that I've thought about in more recent years about leadership being something that should be empowering, I think I've been carrying that with me. That's been something that's really resonated with me for many, many years, and has come out in different ways.
I think you maybe you're also a coach at that point without knowing it as well.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because actually, when I was at the point of making the decision about training as a coach, one of the things that helped me make that decision was looking back and noticing that both the bits of management
Yes.
and the bits of speech and language therapy that most resonated with me were the bits that were most like coaching. So I really enjoyed those one-on-one conversations with people who I was working with as a manager, but I also really enjoyed working actually with stammerers, who very often the issue was not so much the speech impediment, it was the way that the speech impediment shaped and moulded and disfigured really the way that they then interacted with the world.
That's interesting.
And so a lot of the work that I did with those people was around confidence and self-image and self-worth, and a lot of thinking about what might be going on emotionally. So at that point in my life, it was looking back over the previous few years and thinking about the things which were giving me most life, which gave me a clue as to what might be a really good next step.
That's interesting. I've heard people talk about your life message,
Okay, yeah.
and maybe part of your life message is doing that sort of thing and enabling other people to do it. And maybe part of mine as well is wanting people's voices to be heard.
Yeah.
And therefore you might have to delve a bit to find them, and help people reconnect with those voices if they've forgotten things that are important to them. And there might be themes and threads, I think, from earlier parts in our lives or in their lives that can be drawn out now.
Yeah.
And then people's futures can be more connected to what they were called to be, or what was possible for them.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of what I enjoy as a coach as well. I want those voices to be heard, because I think everybody's voice matters. Everybody's life matters.
So if you were to look back at your life journey, then one of the things, for example, we suggest to people that you might like to draw it in whatever makes sense to you, or you might just want to list key events. But actually, if you were to look back, you could see those things, I suspect, those moments when possibilities seem to open up around you because of who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah.
And also there's that sense that there might be things that you can follow a pattern of, well, I've seen these things.
It's an
more
interesting
than
point,
once.
because I've done the life journey graph that you're suggesting that we do, and draw the valleys and the mountains, and found that a very useful experience. But I haven't actually ever done it looking at my chosen career, if you like, and so that's interesting that one could take a theme and think, oh, well, when did that appear?
Yes.
That would be an interesting thing. Whereas I've done the more generic kind of what happened in life, the highs and lows, and looking at seasons from almost sort of in decades, in terms of what happened, what was significant, what helped shape me. My mother's death, getting married, all sorts of leaving university, those kind of things. But I think people could do it in different ways, and learn something from it.
Yes.
And think, okay, what did I learn then, and what could I take from it? We ask people when they're facing a challenge, well, what could you draw on from the past? You're not asking them that question, but you're enabling them to answer that by looking at times when they faced a challenge or a similar challenge, and what did they draw on? How did they enable themselves to be resilient, or whatever it is that might apply now? So I'm sure it could be used in lots of different ways. That's really good.
I think it could be. And then I think the last thing that I would want to highlight as things that you might spot from looking at your life journey would be that there might be kind of bits of emotional baggage that you might pick up along the way. So there might be things that you might want to put down. There might be things where you think, actually, there's a grudge or a piece of unforgiveness that I've been holding for a while, and it might be that God is inviting us to gently put down the things that we're carrying which have a bit of weight about them. So
they can be good indications, can't they?
They can.
Of times you might want to work with someone on that, or spend time with God on X and Y part of our life to have that kind of cleaned out and start again, or healed, or whatever it is. That will probably create more headspace for more new things, and more integration within ourselves, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true. So in summary, I would say that it's really helpful to look back at your life journey. And that exactly what you look back at, it doesn't really matter. If you just begin the exercise of drawing out your life journey and then reflecting on it, then I think you can trust that God will help you to spot the things that it will be helpful for you to spot in this moment. And that might be any of the things that we have just been talking about, or none of them, or it might be something entirely different.
Yeah, absolutely.